My sister's voice cut through the silence as she leveled the gun at me. She told me to sign the papers or else. My father stood against the wall, silent, as if his stillness excused him from the choice. I didn't sign. Instead, I smiled and pointed to the corner of the room. She turned, saw the camera's red light blinking, and her face went pale. Seconds later, the bang ripped through the air, sharp and jarring, though the lens still glowed steady. That was where the day ended. But if you want to understand how it began, you have to go back to what seemed like nothing more than a family gathering. We had rented a small house outside the city, the kind of beige, bland vacation rental that looked like no one had ever really lived there. My mother bustled around the kitchen, unpacking groceries, fussing with bread, and bananas sandwiches she would try to arrange into a performance of care. She smiled too brightly, like she was determined to prove something. My father came in slowly, cooler in hand, his expression neutral, the way he always carried himself when he wanted to avoid taking sides. Then came my sister, perfume wafting ahead of her sunglasses, perched in her hair, air kisses on my cheek. For a moment, it could have been mistaken for a normal family day. We even went for a walk down the little trail behind the house. My father commented on the weather, my mother pointed at flowers, and my sister checked her phone when she thought no one was looking. From a distance, we must have looked like an ordinary family sharing an ordinary Saturday. Back at the table, my mother laid out sandwiches, fruit chips, her ritual of excess. We sat and chewed in silence until my sister's voice cracked the quiet. She asked what I planned to do with the inheritance. The word landed with weight, shifting everything. My mother looked down at her plate. My father sipped water, and my sister's smile was too bright. I shrugged and told her I hadn't decided. She pressed harder eyes, fixed her tone casual, but calculated. My father murmured that family should share, that it was the right thing. I sipped coffee, let the words sit, and replied only, "We'll see." My mother leapt in with questions about my work, desperate to smooth the edges, but the silence had thickened the inheritance sitting at the table with us, louder than the food, heavier than any words. Then my sister smiled and suggested we go see something in the other room. My father rose without meeting my eyes, chair scraping like a warning. They led me down the hall into a spare room, just a table, 2 chairs, and a stack of papers waiting. My sister slid them across the table as my father stood guard at the door. I skimmed the pages, my breath slowing with every line. It was a waiver transferring everything, the entire inheritance, to them. Not a portion, not even a split. All of it. I laughed once dry sharp. They expected me to sign away everything with the stroke of a pen. My sister called it what he would have wanted. My father told me not to be difficult. I called it what it was, robbery dressed as paperwork. The pen sat on the table. My sister pushed it toward me, suggesting dignity, urging speed. I told her no. The word echoed larger than the room. My father's eyes narrowed. He told me I would regret it. I told him I regretted coming. That was when she reached into her bag and pulled out the gun. For a moment, the air vanished. Even my mother's voice drifting from the kitchen announcing tea sounded unreal. My sister's hands were steady as she aimed. She told me to sign. My father's silence was louder than her command. I put the pen down gently and told her no again. Then I smiled and pointed to the corner, told her to look. She turned, saw the small black lens and its blinking red light, and the color drained from her face. My father's eyes followed. The gun trembled as she demanded to know what it was. I told her it was watching, recording every second. Panic surged in her voice. She raised the gun toward the camera and pulled the trigger. The bang echoed. My mother gasped in the kitchen, and still the lens burned red. The confusion on my sister's face was almost louder than the shot. She fired again, shaking, and again the camera stood steady. She lowered the weapon, frantic, demanding answers. That was when the footsteps came, measured, heavy, controlled. The door burst open, and 2 men entered, not uniforms, but presence, the kind that fills a room. They told her to put the gun down. Her hand shook swinging between them, but in seconds her wrist gave way and the gun clattered to the table. They cuffed her, pressed a hand on my father's shoulder until he froze. The room finally exhaled. I looked at my sister, her eyes wide, her fury useless. I told her it was all recorded, that she wasn't walking away this time. She glared, words tumbling unsaid. But the truth was, it had all been planned long before this day began. The bang still echoed when the men secured the weapon. My sister's wrist was cuffed, her anger dissolving into fear as she glanced from the camera to the strangers, who now filled the room with quiet authority. My father froze near the door, a statue in denial, his silence heavier than chains. The air was sharp with smoke, the echo of shots still crawling along the walls. But the lens in the corner blinked on, as steady as before. My sister demanded to know how it hadn't broken, how it still filmed her every twitch and gasp. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the silence stretch, because silence sometimes cuts deeper than words. The footsteps, the intervention, the unfaltering red light. It all looked sudden, but none of it was coincidence. Days before, my younger brother had called me in a rare moment of nervous loyalty. He told me he overheard our parents and sister whispering. He couldn't bear to repeat everything, didn't want to be dragged into the ugliness. But he gave me enough. Enough that I froze mid-call and understood that something was coming. Something dangerous. I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I knew what my family was capable of. The greed, the entitlement, the certainty that I was always second place, it all lined up too neatly. So I made preparations. It wasn't luck that saved me, nor fate, nor divine protection. It was planning. I had reached out to professionals, not the police, but private security, the kind of men who know how to control a room without firing a shot. They had warned me not to go to that house, told me it wasn't worth the risk. But stubbornness runs deep in me. I told them I was going anyway. If I stayed home, I would always wonder. If I confronted them, at least I would know. So they backed me, setting cameras in corners while I walked the trail with my parents and sister. They swept the rooms, checked the hiding places, and found the gun before I even saw it. They didn't remove it. They didn't need to. They made sure it would only bark sound and smoke, not bullets. They waited outside, watching through the feeds, ready for the moment my sister's temper burned past reason. When she pulled that trigger, her panic was the first true mask to slip. For years, she had smirked, polished, performed as the perfect one. But in that moment, she was nothing but desperate. My father's silence betrayed him too, exposing what he always thought, that staying still excused complicity. My mother's gasp from the kitchen told her story as well, the kind of gasp that knows what's happening but still pretends it can't be real. After the gun clattered and the cuffs clicked, the house felt like a stage gone dark. My sister shouted half-formed threats. My father sagged against the wall. My mother finally appeared in the doorway, clutching her apron like a shield. And me, I stayed seated, calm on the outside, though inside my hands shook where no one could see. I had dared them to show me who they really were, and they had. The days that followed blurred with police reports, lawyer meetings, endless recountings of events. Each word was weighed, each sentence examined, while I sat with the knowledge that everything had been recorded. There was no twisting this story, no chance for them to paint me as dramatic, ungrateful, or cruel. The camera had captured it all. But to understand why my sister would risk pulling a gun, why my father would stand silent, why my mother would set out sandwiches while knowing what waited down the hall. You have to understand the family I came from. I grew up in the middle, invisible but noisy. I was the one who caused trouble just to make sure anyone noticed me. My sister was the golden child, perfect in every way, weaponizing her perfection against me in whispers and sneers. My brother was quieter, sometimes protective, sometimes distant, but never cruel. And my grandfather, he was the only one who ever looked at me and saw me for who I was. The inheritance they tried to steal was his. They thought he had nothing because he wore the same shirts for decades and showed up to birthdays with cards from discount stores. They mocked him, rolled their eyes, whispered that he embarrassed the family. But he had lived by his own rules, investing quietly, steadily, until the modest sums grew into millions. When he died at 96, the will was read. And to their shock, he left everything to me. I hadn't expected it. None of us had. But in hindsight, I understood. He knew what it felt like to be dismissed, undervalued, overlooked. He had seen me, and he chose me. That choice was the match that lit every grudge, every resentment, every selfish ambition in my family. And it brought me to that rented house sitting across from my sister, with a gun in her hand, my father watching silently, my mother pretending sandwiches could hide the truth. The will reading was like watching the ground shift beneath everyone's feet. We sat in the lawyer's office, stiff chairs lined up the air, heavy with dust and stale coffee. My sister whispered to my brother that maybe we'd inherit old socks or a battered coffee mug. My father chuckled. My mother shook her head, and I bit the inside of my cheek silently, bracing for more mockery. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and read the document. He said my name, then declared that my grandfather had left everything to me. Not a portion, not a token, but his entire estate. At first, no one understood. My sister barked out a laugh, demanded to know if it was some kind of joke. My father's face flushed with disbelief. My mother muttered about mistakes. Then the lawyer explained, calm and steady, that the estate was worth more than $8 million. He had invested quietly for decades, letting small sums grow into a fortune. Suddenly, the man they had dismissed as poor, sloppy, and embarrassing was revealed as a man of foresight. And his judgment of who deserved it was final. The silence that followed was colder than ice. My sister hissed that I didn't deserve it. My father slammed his hand on the armrest, demanding fairness. My mother's eyes were full of disapproval. I just sat there, stunned, my pulse loud in my ears. For once, they were all looking at me not as the troublemaker or the invisible one, but as the heir. The attention I'd craved as a child didn't feel like triumph. It felt like being trapped beneath a spotlight that burned instead of warmed. After that day, everything between us changed. They grew colder, sharper, circling around me like predators waiting for a mistake. They invited me to that rented house under the guise of family time, but really, it was a setup. They tried polite persuasion at first, hinting that family should share. When that failed, they shoved papers across the table. When I refused, they escalated. The inheritance had exposed the truth of what I had always suspected. I was never family to them in the way Ryan the Golden One was to my parents, or in the way my sister believed she was entitled to everything. I was an obstacle, a barrier to be removed. When my sister pulled the gun, it wasn't a shock so much as confirmation. They had spent their lives teaching me that my needs didn't matter, that my voice could be ignored, that what I wanted could be dismissed. But they underestimated me. I had outgrown their scripts. The camera in the corner and the men waiting outside were proof. The aftermath dragged into courts and hearings. Lawyers filed papers, judges asked questions, reporters sniffed at the edges. Every detail of that day was pulled apart, but I had the recordings. My sister's voice commanding me to sign. My father standing mute, approving by silence. My mother's kitchen clatter as she tried to pretend normalcy. It was undeniable. The court didn't pity them. My sister received 7 years. My father was sentenced to 2 for complicity. My mother avoided prison but walked away with probation and community service, her reputation crumbling. When they were led out of the courtroom, there was no satisfaction in me, only a deep exhaustion. They had finally revealed themselves in a way no one could deny, and the world saw what I had always lived. After the trial, the estate was fully settled. The fortune was mine. For weeks, I walked around in a daze, waiting for someone to strip it away to declare it a mistake. But no one did. The wealth was real, and it was mine alone. At first, it felt strange, like wearing clothes that didn't belong to me. For so long, I had been braced for loss, for disappointment, for betrayal. Having something permanent felt almost alien. But I remembered my grandfather's lessons. He had lived simply never flaunting what he had, because he knew the danger of envy. He once told me that if people know you're rich, they stop seeing you and start seeing only your money. So I chose to honor that. I lived quietly. I invested. I didn't buy flashy cars or sprawling mansions. I used it carefully, like he had to build safety and freedom. Still, I allowed myself joy. I traveled to places I'd only ever seen in books. Italy, Japan islands, where the sea glowed turquoise. I ate food that made me laugh from the sheer wonder of it. I bought comfort when I needed it, freedom when I craved it. But at home, I lived modestly. Neighbors thought I was just another middle-class woman with a modest house and a sensible car. That was the way I liked it. I didn't forget the ones who deserved my loyalty. My younger brother, the one who had quietly warned me, received what he never asked for. I paid for his education, cleared his debts, and helped him build a life of his own. He never demanded, never manipulated. He simply accepted my help with gratitude, and for that, I trusted him. As for my sister, she sat behind bars. My father counted the years in shame. My mother lived with the weight of her own choices, unable to escape the stain of what she had done. They had gambled everything on greed, and they lost. Yet victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like finally setting down a burden I had carried my entire life. The burden of being unseen, unwanted, unvalued. For the first time, I wasn't fighting for recognition. I had it, and I had the freedom to decide what came next. 5 years later, my life is unrecognizable. I am married now with a daughter whose laughter fills every corner of our home. From the outside, we look ordinary. A modest house, a car in the driveway, neighbors chatting about the weather. But behind the quiet facade, I carry the security my grandfather left me. I've invested wisely, built a trust for my daughter's future, and ensured that no matter what happens, she will never have to beg or fear or wonder if she is enough. I have not let my parents or sister back into my life. People ask if I feel guilty, if I'll forgive them one day. My answer is simple. Forgiveness is not the same as access. I have let go of the weight they put on me, but I will never hand them another chance to harm me. They chose greed over love, silence over protection, violence over family. That is who they are. I choose something different. The money changed my life, yes, but the real gift was something deeper. My grandfather gave me proof that I mattered, that I was worthy. He saw me when no one else did. And now I carry that lesson forward. My daughter will never doubt her value. She will never wonder if love is conditional. She will never have to make noise just to be noticed. Looking back, I see that the inheritance was not just wealth, it was a chance to break a cycle. I chose to use it not to flaunt power, but to build peace. I finally understand what my grandfather meant when he said, even if he was rich, he would live the same way. True wealth is not what you show. It's the freedom to live without fear, without needing others' approval. So, if you ask me whether I regret any of it, the trials, the betrayals, the courtroom battles, even the gun pointed at me, my answer is no, because through it all, I discovered the strength to stand alone, to defend what was mine, and to build a new life rooted in love, not fear. And now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, would you have signed those papers to keep the peace? Or would you have stood your ground, knowing it might cost you everything? Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. I'd love to know what you think.